Let's have a little talk about the record asylum claims, a 20-year high. Sunak himself now saying this is unsustainable as the cost is doubling to $4 billion a year of the taxpayer, and that after the government actually managed to save $4 billion a year in debt repayments, that's just disappeared straight away. I mean, can a government get control of this? Any government get control of this situation?
They do, but I think the problem is that we're all looking at trying to get simple answers to it, and there's no real soundbite solutions to it. It's a complex situation, needs complex answers. But for years now, we've seen this backlog increasing, which could have been dealt with by processing claims a lot faster, which would reduce, obviously, a lot of the costs on the taxpayer. And the increase in costs is quite astounding. It's almost doubled from last year, but it's not comparative to the number of asylum applications. So we need to be looking at where that allocation of resources is, what's a better use for it. Some of the expenditure we're seeing at the moment is on things that we can see don't work. That should really be taken away so it's saving the taxpayer money.
I mean, one thing that is clearly costing a lot of money is putting migrants up in hotels, and so the government came up with this idea they're going to stick them all on, well, stick 500, which is barely a drop in the ocean, on the Bibby Stockholm, which I think worked out as about 1.5 million per bed. It doesn't seem like much of a saving on, putting up people who've waited for their asylum applications to be processed in the Ritz, quite frankly. What could we do to lower those costs of accommodation that would actually keep people who decry whatever the government tries to do happy? Because it seems to me if the government starts saying, well, we're going to have to create temporary marquees, we're going to do this, but, nothing's good enough. Nothing's good enough. It's all evil. It's all sort of anti-migrant. But we've got to get these costs down. What are the options?
Well, ironically, it's actually the more humane options, which are cheaper. The UNHCR has just put forward it's had a pilot scheme running in the UK on investing in local communities for a community support scheme. Now, we used to use these far more heavily years ago, back actually 20 years ago when we saw higher levels of asylum applications. And they work a lot better. What they do is they invest into the communities as well. So particularly the cost of living crisis time, it benefits everybody. It's not just asylum seekers who are getting benefits from this. But it works out a lot cheaper. What we're seeing at the moment, though, is the government seems to have backed itself into a corner. Things like the barge, which, as you said, is phenomenally more expensive than even using hotels, because they've got to show they're doing something. Now,
can you explain what the community support scheme involves? You say it works out cheaper. The UNHCR said this is a better course of action. But what is that? Is that sort of giving migrants pay and then giving them social housing? Is that saying go and move in with Mrs. Jones at the end of the road? I mean, what is this?
No, it's not. Asylum seekers can't get council housing. They're not allowed to. So it's not using social housing. But what it does is it invests into communities in general. So not just in housing, but also GPs, legal advice, the whole package of situations that everybody's using in those communities to reinforce them and build those up again. So they've got the structure to be able to hold them. It also encourages communities to pull together to provide, yes, spare rooms in some cases and things like that. But also we've got about 600,000 plus vacant properties in the UK at the moment. Obviously, not all can be used, but it allows for communities to say, well, we've got this vacant property, we can use that, for example.
So when you say vacant properties, I mean, this can't be vacant houses particularly, because we know there's a housing shortage of, so much so that we'd need to build 200,000 per year over the next 20 years just to close the gap. So what sort of vacant properties are we talking about?
That's the funny thing, actually. These are vacant residential properties, the 600,000. Obviously, as I said, a lot can't be used. They're privately owned. I'm not suggesting we take people's properties. But when you're investing into the communities, those owners can then use... They've been seen to put those forward as a more suitable accommodation. And that then supports everybody. It provides them with a better way of using the property as well. So it's all part of this wider package that can be used, which reduces those costs. And more importantly, and specifically with this, it gives communities a say in how they're handling things.
I mean, the thing is, Daniel, with communities getting a say on how things are being handled, I think if you really were to put this to a plebiscite and ask communities what they think, a vast majority of people would probably turn around and say, we don't want them coming here. Now, whether that's right or whether that's wrong, I would assume if there was some sort of referenda or local referenda on this issue, a huge amount of towns and cities around the UK would say we're not sympathetic and we're not interested in helping.
The polling on it's pretty evenly split and fluctuates depending on day of the week, to be honest. A lot of it's influenced by what people see. But it's pretty evenly split between positive and negative towards asylum seekers. What we're seeing at the moment, though, is communities having their views completely dismissed. For example, with the barges, with camps. We've seen it where the Home Office has said, no, we're not going to listen to the community. We're going to ride roughshod and say you're going to have to do this, even overruling planning applications. This at least gives those communities a say. So the ones which are more amenable to this are able to say, yes, OK, we're going to work with these schemes. And that provides that basis. So it actually works out better for everybody, for those communities which are saying we can do this, to do it. And the communities don't have the Home Office forcing camps upon people where they don't want them.
Now, just let's go back to processing here. And a lot of people saying, well, why on earth are you not processing quicker? Because people are waiting 2 years even to have their initial asylum application looked at. And they're rattling around, being paid for, unable to work, completely inert, not able to fully integrate because they're not a part of the fabric of society, and essentially just doing nothing. And yet, I think the risk may be if we were to expedite the application process. Currently, there's a sort of success rate of around 71%. You'll probably have a more precise statistic than that. Do you think the government are worried if they suddenly say to this 175,000 people waiting for their applications to be processed, right, we're going to, speed you through the system, that the vast majority will be told yes, and that's not going to go down well with the public either?
Well, the Minister of Immigration only a couple of weeks ago effectively admitted that's what the government is saying, that they don't want to process applications faster because as his words, he would see it as a pull factor. Now, we know it's not a pull factor because the backlog's been rising for about 8-9 years now. And obviously, we're seeing the increase in numbers. But what we also see, if you process those applications faster, it's not just the people you're accepting. You're just not leaving people in limbo in the hotels at a cost to the taxpayer. About half of those in hotels are made up of 5 nationalities: Afghans, Iranians, Syrians, Eritreans, and Sudanese, all of whom have an application success rate pretty much above 90%. Eritreans, for example, 100%. Afghans are 98%. So yes, you will see a lot more applications processed. But the alternative is those people are left in limbo at cost to the taxpayer, whereas if they are actually granted refugee status, they can rebuild their own lives, start paying into the community, earning, paying taxes. That starts to benefit everybody. So it really is a choice that the government's making between now of costing the taxpayer money to leave them in limbo, or process applications, of which not all will be successful, about 29% won't be, and the rest can start contributing.
Thank you very so much, Daniel Sahaj there, Director of Stand for All, a human rights organisation.